Any man's work abide which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire.
Clearly, we are being tested. The church is being tested. The land is being tested. The world is being tested. But more importantly, we as Christians are being tested. And as we journey on here, God periodically will give us tests because that's the objective of Bible studies, of sermons, of the Word of God being implanted in our lives. It's towards the end that at some point, God will test the knowledge with a good motive in mind for us to evaluate where we are, for us to evaluate the things that we might need to improve upon. So in the natural, when we are educating someone, as a teacher is educating a child, or a parent is educating a child, uh, at some point, we want to see results. We want to see what kind of work or what kind of education is being done in order for the person to understand where he is, and the teacher, if you will, to understand where the person is. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9, Scripture says that we are God's fellow workers. In other words, we as pastors or ministers, the objective here is for us to co-labor with God in His field, in His church. And you are God's field. The church is God's field. The church, God brings people there that He has drawn, that the Father has drawn to the Son. And there's an education, a biblical education or a spiritual education that begins. And of course, you are God's building. So on this foundation that I've been talking about for the last, I don't know how long, on this foundation, a building is being erected. And God will determine when this building lifts up. And because this building is going up in a city, or in the city, we call it Jerusalem. And in the city is buildings. According to the grace of God, which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it, but let each one take heed how he should build it. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19 through 22. Now, therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ Himself being the chief cornerstone. Continue, 21 to 22.
In whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of God
So
through the
now we
Spirit.
understand that why this building is being erected, because it is a holy habitation of God in the Spirit. Go back, turning back to 1 Corinthians 3, and I'm going to pick up with verse 11. For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and straw, each one work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test each one work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. So there is a day of testing. to see how much we understand, how much we may need to improve, how much more we need to build up to get ready for the coming of the Lord. In Hebrews 10:24 and 25.
And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching.
So there is a day approaching where we should gather together more in order to stir up love and good works. And because this building that's on this foundation will be tested in James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4.
My brethren, count it all joy when you fall
Now
in.
that's a mouthful. My brethren, count it all joy. Normally, we do not count it joyful when we fall in diverse temptations. Continue.
Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing.
Well, it works patience, but it works a whole lot of things as well, other kinds of things. But this work is going to be declared by fire. And so fire is something that most times in the natural we tend to avoid because fire burns. But this test that we're on, there's a burning that's going to take place. And we're going to see what the foundation is, whether it's gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 through 9.
Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to his abundant mercy hath begotten us again unto a lively hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, and that fadeth not away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by
Verse
the power.
5 says, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. So we had a faith that we were delivered into the first time, but there's something called a last time faith. And this faith will be revealed in the testing of fire. Continue.
Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations.
So we are in heaviness through manifold or various tribulations and trials. But there is a joy reserved on the other side of the heaviness. And the day will declare it by fire. Continue.
That the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ.
So this faith is much more precious than gold, though it's tested by fire. May be found to what? Praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So there's a revelation of Christ that will be seen through this trying of this faith that is being tested by fire. Continue.
Whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now you see him not, yet believing ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory.
And so it said there is an expression of joy in the process, joy in the journey, even though we are beset by various trials, by various temptations, by various seducing, because there's a trying of our faith. And this faith is going to be declared in fire. As a matter of fact, this is the only way that this kind of faith that I'm talking about is going to be declared through fire. Continue.
Receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your
So my
souls.
soul is going to be all wrapped up at the end because there is what you call our beginning salvation, our keeping salvation, and now our final salvation. And this is some of what the fire may look like. It may vary. These are some characteristics of particular fires. And I don't know a lot about fires, but I'm sure, like everything else in God's creation, it has particular characteristics. And so in the biblical or spiritual fire, you may experience or you may not experience some of this, or you may experience all of it. In Psalms 42, starting with verse 9, 10, and 11.
I will say unto God my rock, why hast thou forgotten me? Why go I mourning because of the oppression of the enemy?
You be saying to yourself, because the fire is so intense, the fire is unrelenting, and the fire, quite frankly, you can smell burning, even though you might not be burned up. You might think that you're going to get burned up because of the intensity of the flames. So you might say to your foundation, I was saying to God, my foundation, why hast thou forgotten me? Why go I mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Continue.
As with a sword in my bones, mine enemies reproach me, while they say daily unto me, where is thy
Where's your
God?
God? Where's your God in the midst of the fire? Where's your God in the midst of the burning? Where's your God in the midst of the temptation? Where's your God in the midst of the trial? Where's your God in the midst of your mourning, in the unexpected? Where is your God? These are the characteristics of some kinds of fire that come into our lives. And also in verse 11,
Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God, for I shall yet praise him, who is the health of my countenance and my God.
so as this foundation that we are standing on and the building is being built and the fire comes, you say, why are you cast down, O my soul? Hope in God. Characteristic when a fire is burning all around you and you see no way out. So you say to yourself, where is God in the midst of my trials, my tribulations, my mourning? Where is God in the midst of my health and my sickness? Where are you, God? In Psalms 3, verse 1 through 8.
Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. Selah. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter up of mine head.
So all you see is trouble all around you. All you see is issues and problems and situations. And you find yourself being vexed about something almost all day long because things keep popping off, popping off, popping off. You say to yourself, what? This is just madness. This is just insanity. So this fire that is sent for, and sometimes we think fire is only sent for the unrighteous, but God sends a holy fire for the righteous. See, in that fire, if we hang on to that and stand on that foundation, we won't burn. We'll smell smoke, though, for real. And the fire will get awfully close. And you say to yourself, what? My God. Continue.
I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill, Selah. I laid me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained
So
me.
you lay down and you realize, you say, Lord, just let sleep come. I mean, just let me just go to sleep so I can hide myself out of the flames and the fire that are dancing around me. I go to sleep. And what a wonderful thing in these days is to garner some really good sleep. You wake up and you say to yourself, thank God, thank God, and realize that you got over because you actually went to sleep. I mean, and I woke. For what? The Lord sustain me. Continue.
I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all my enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly.
Salvation belongs. Here it is, that salvation again. Salvation, because on the day of testing, you got to be saved all over again, probably several times a day. In the day when the fire comes into your life, because of the testing of the God has to test and see. So we know how to proceed from here. We have a clear understanding of God and his salvation and how marvelous it is. In Psalms 27, verse 1 through 6.
The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my
Lord,
life.
there's plenty of things to fear. It's plenty of things to fear. So the psalmist is saying, as to vindicate himself in some way by saying, I cried unto the Lord with my Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? It's a question. Whom shall I fear? And then he comes back to his senses, because, we move in and out of our senses when we're in the fire. So we ask ourselves questions that we already know the answer to. And so when the answer is quickened on the inside of me, these are, oh yeah, the Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Continue.
When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be
All
confident.
component parts of some fires that we're in. Just our enemy is after us. This thing is going on. That thing is going on. We don't understand, when you in the midst of a fire, exactly what's going on. And then when the fire dissipates, you get a real good understanding of what is going on inside of you, as well as what's going on inside of you. But we should be confident in this sense. We have to remind ourselves in Daniel chapter 3, verse 24 and 26, who's in the fire with us.
Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God.
Amen. So God is in the fire with us, and we have to comfort ourselves and each other. That's why church is so essential, because in church, you comfort yourself with the scriptures. You comfort yourself with the reality that God is in the fire with us. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9.
The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly.
He knows how to deliver us out of the fire at the set time. Even though it's burning all around us, he knows how to deliver us out of the fire. He knows what ladder and what angle that we are to come out of it. Because the fire is designed to test every man's work. That's what 1 Corinthians 3, verse 9, 13. This fire will test my work as fellow workers of Christ. Every pastor, our work will be tested by fire. And the fire has started today. That it's going to be tested, and it's going to be refined, and the dross have to come up, and all the things that we don't understand or need more shine to it or gleam to it. So this is what's going on in our world today, when all the foundations are being shaken. But not only are the foundations being shaken in the world, the foundations are being shaken in the church, which is most important to us. But one thing is for sure, there's a solid foundation. And on that solid foundation, you and I stand. And on that solid foundation, it has a seal. No matter what goes on, God knows those that are his. And no good thing will he withhold from those that are his. So all things work together for good for those that love God. In Esther chapter 1, little did she understand and know about the fire that would come into her life as well as to her peoples, to her country, to her family. But God had a plan from the very beginning for Esther. And in chapter 1, basically, because I'm going through the whole chapter, so I'm going to paraphrase the first chapter and some other chapters as well, and just go to the scriptures that relate back to what I'm talking about. But in the book of Esther, chapter 1, the king had a grand old party. It was a big deal. I mean, he had food and wine. He invited peoples. He had gold goblets. I mean, he had a toe down, once in a lifetime, big shindig. I'm going to do this thing party. And it was a big deal. And in the meantime, in this chapter 1 in the book of Esther, the queen was having a party too. And so they partying in separate places in the house, and, everybody's getting down, and all that. And then, King Ahasuerus, I cannot pronounce his name. I'm going to call him King A. King A. And if you can look in the book of Esther, if you can pronounce it, as they say, have faith to yourself. You can pronounce it to yourself. So King A, he's all fired up, and, he's feeling real good, and he might had one too many, because after all, it's a party. And he decides, because he's shown all of his peoples, all of his stuff, and, he's kind of showing off. And he said, I want y'all to see Queen Vashti. And Queen Vashti said, it ain't happening. I'm not coming. And my boy gets provoked, because, he's looking bad. All of his, they call them, in our road dogs, all of them are there. And and he looking real bad, You can't, look, all you're asking your wife is to come, because she was a beautiful woman. And, he was showing off and say, come, he said, come on, Queen Vashti, come on up in here. And she said, I'm not coming. So he became very provoked by her behavior. Verse 19.
If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians.
I'm sorry, verse 12. The book of Esther, chapter 1, verse 12.
But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him.
Verse 19.
If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment.
So as a result of her not coming in, he goes and issue a royal decree. Continue.
Commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she.
In other words, you and I are done, basically, and I'm picking another queen. We history, you and me, because you done humble me before my road dogs, before my people, before, all my special people, and I'm not having it. So in chapter 2, starting with verse 4 through 10, so this decree goes out, and they're looking for someone to replace Vashti. And in chapter 2, starting with verse 4.
And let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did
So they
so.
had a bunch of women throughout the kingdom come and, if you will, display themselves. And some people get all hyped up about this, but you got all of these TV programs where the bachelor wife, I mean, not the bachelor, like the bachelorette, and all these folks doing the same identical thing, but we're not going to go there. All right. So anyway, they go and they, stand before the king, and he chooses Vashti in verse 5, chapter 2.
Now in Shushan, the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took her for his own daughter.
So Mordecai took this Esther in, and he raised her like his own daughter. And of course, he put in her a foundation which will be later tested. Continue.
So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification.
And it goes on just for time. Verse 10, Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal that. And so, oftentimes, sometimes even when our children, our teenagers, our adults even, they may go to certain job sites and they fail to cause the employer and the people around them to know that, for example, they're Christian. So they in this case, Mordecai told her not to do it, that she was what eventually we would know later that she was Jew. But oftentimes, and sometimes there's a very good purpose for it, and because you want to, if you will, fit in for a season. And so people get to know you and not necessarily know that you're a Christian, because sometimes that's a turnoff. So you have to be wiser, and because the Bible said wisdom is justified of her children. In this case, Mordecai told her, don't let on that you are a Jew. And going down to verse 20 through 23.
Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with
And
him.
here it is, this foundation, how she obeyed him, even though she was her own woman, and she was even in the palace to become queen. She did not forget the foundation that she was raised on. Continue.
In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus.
So anyway, he had a conspiracy, betrayal that was in the wind. And these were the two guys that wanted to, as the scripture said, lay their hands on King A. Come on.
And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name.
So Mordecai knew this information, gave it to Queen Esther, and Esther went to tell the King A about it. Verse 23.
And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king.
But the test was yet to come. God, this is what you call setup. So God was setting her up because it's going to be upon her in this season of her life to go into a fire and to be tested by fire for the purposes of God. So each one of us will be tested by fire. Now, obviously, when we see a fire blazing, obviously in the natural, you want to run in the opposite direction. And same it is in the spiritual. We don't see the fire of God and run into it. Quite frankly, most of the time, someone, probably and mainly the Holy Spirit, is just dragging us into it because we're not trying to, we like the idea of an outward spirituality and outward faith, those kinds of things, because it makes us spiritually look good. I mean, we all want to be spiritual. And I have found in these days this very notion of looking spiritual and looking like you have faith isn't good enough. You actually, God is working in us in this fire to actually have it. And it's difficult to apprehend because we are in these bodies. And these bodies are very frightened of spiritual things and things we don't understand. Therefore, and most of the time, there's a tug of war on between our spirit and our flesh. That the flesh asks the question, where are you, oh my God? And our flesh has the answer, God is right here. So, we just go back and forth between the flesh and the spirit. But she's being set up. And God sets the scene for the fire. And sometimes you can smell smoke because stuff is being set up around you. And when you come out of the fire, it's almost like when Isaac, Abraham's son, was that Isaac? Mm-hmm. When he was laid on the altar, he was laid on the altar and he was bound up and he had the wood laid in order. Now, he knew something was up. Now, he was getting something was going to happen from the sky, if you will, or from the knife that Abraham had, which he didn't see, by the way. Something was going to happen with the knife, and he was going to be lit too, So either way, once they took the knife and got him, then it's, he had to be, Scripture said, a burnt offering. So it was some fire was going to fall. And so sometimes, we can see God laying the wood, and he got the light, and he got something to bound with. And the question is, who's getting ready to be lit here, In chapter 3, starting with verse 1 through 7.
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him.
So this Haman, that's basically who he is. He was set in a really high position. And so, most people, sometimes we want to be set up in high position, and God won't permit it because we're not ready. And so this is an example of someone that wasn't ready, but God put him there because the whole idea was he was not a vessel of honor. He was a vessel of dishonor, and God uses both in the fire. Continue.
And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him, but Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence.
So in these days of bowing, if you will, Mordecai understood that he was not to bow to Haman. And Haman, when people think that you should bow to them, they get upset. They can even get violent, when they think that you should bow to them, that they are the master and you are the slave, because the slave always thinks he can be a better master than the master. But as I already told you, when a slave gets into the master position, he has to get the former master back for all the stuff he did. But we always think that we're going to be better some kind of way. So Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. I need the time, please. Then the king's servant who were within the gates, king said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's commandment? And so they go on, and Mordecai verse 4, he would not do it. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. I better read the first 4 myself. Now that happened when they spoke to him daily, he would not listen to them, and they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. In other words, whether Mordecai would eventually bow. But Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. He couldn't do it. He said, bow, you do not bow before any man, but the only person we bow before is God. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. And that's what happens when you don't bow to just regular people like you. They get ugly. They get ugly when you don't bow. And so Haman got ugly because he got full of him. You know how you can get full of you. So he got full. And continue. Verse 6.
And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai.
So because of that act, that Mordecai would not bow to him, he wanted to destroy all of them. All of them. That's how full people get of themselves when they think they should be the master, or they think they have something on you or over you. They think you should bow down. But every saint in the Bible understands you don't bow before any man but God. Continue. Verse 7.
In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar.
And Adar means fire. So in that month, the fire was going to come to test the resolve of the people of God. So we live in a world today where the fire has come to test the resolve of the people of God, just as it was in that day. Continue with verse 8 through 15.
And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people.
So Haman goes and talked to King A, and he said, you got folks there that are not bowing down. Not only do they not bow down, they have different laws, they have a different culture, they are not going to be immersed into our culture and to our way of thinking. They are not free to think as they choose about the stimuli that comes their way. They're not thinking like us. And so when they're not thinking like us, there is a fire that is going to come. So say they're not thinking it, they won't obey our laws, they don't see things the way we see. They may agree with our cause, but they might not agree with our solution. And so therefore, anybody that opposes us, they have to be killed. I mean, we had echoes of that in our history before, when one group doesn't submit to the other group. And fire comes down, and it kills the righteous and the unrighteous. But the righteous have an address in a city called New Jerusalem. They just move on to their next house. They said, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, so they were, if you will, gunning for them from the very beginning. They were abiding and abetting their time until the time came that it was enough cultural laws that were on their side in order to implement their plan. Therefore, it's not fitting for the king to let them remain. You cannot continue to have them in this kingdom differing from the law of what we say is the law. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to, or you can say it like that, you can have the enemy of the Christians, because you just put in the noun that at the time may be the people of choice to be seen as the enemy. But this is the month of fire. So fire is coming down because every man's work has to be tested, because the foundation is Christ and the building is going up, and we might think it might be ready to go up, but it's not, because certain things may be burned in order for it to be replaced and something better put in its place, or better understanding of how to put something in place. It says, so in verse 11, the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you, do to them as it seemed good to you. Because the king, he's all over the place. He's not, and he said, well, because he put Haman in charge. So he's not involved in that. If someone came to him with the request, he put a signet ring on it and said, well, you take care of it. I'm not concerned about that. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and the decree was written according to all that Haman commanded. To the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its strip, and to every people in their language. In the name of King A, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of fire, and to plunder their possessions. Verse 14.
The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day.
Verse 15.
The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed.
He was completely obliviated to what was going on, had no clue. He sat down and drank with his chief person that he put in charge. In Esther chapter 4, starting with verse 1 through 4.
When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth.
But he was loud. He was put on sackcloth. He started to pray and howl because he realized his people were going to be annihilated. But no one could enter the king's gates clothed with sackcloth, and he sat there in it. Continue.
And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews.
So we started fasting and weeping and wailing. Because when you see the fire coming, or you're in the fire, it's a good thing to start fasting and weeping and wailing. Just because it has not gotten to you yet, it is coming. So if we do nothing, it's coming. But if we do something, we might delay it for the next generation, for our family, for our friends. But it's coming anyway. The fire to test our faith. The fire is coming from our world as well. So those are two separate fires. One is burning outside and one is burning in house. So it's coming anyway. And so while we have an opportunity, it is good for us to weep and wail and pray because this is the time to do it because you can smell the smoke. You know it's coming. Continue.
So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he
But he
received
would
it
not
not.
accept it because he knew the times he was living in, that it wasn't time to make merry and be like it was before. You know, when 2020 started, there were a lot of people in the ministry and out of the ministry, you know, that called this a year vision. I mean, it was, clarity, but we didn't, or they didn't, I should say, understand what was it to clarify. And we always think, positive and good. We think about prosperity and wealth and blessing. And little did we know what was going to transpire in our world. And, at our watch night service, I started to think about it and look back and say to myself, well, what was our watch night service about? And what our watch night service was about was that we would not be ashamed. We would not be ashamed. He was going to take away our shame. And so now we understand, I hope, in part, because when you start weeping and wailing and saying to yourself, many that be increased that trouble me, many that say of my soul, there's no help for me in God. And so we have to remember that God told us that he was going to take away our shame. So Mordecai was not receiving it. This is no time to be merry. And he made it very clear to Esther, and he told Esther what was going on, because sometimes, you're so hidden away from what's going on, you continue to live your life or our lives as if nothing is going on. But plenty is going on. And we have to live our lives understanding that plenty was going on. So she's in the palace. She doesn't know what's going on. And so he tell her this and that and the other and was going to happen. And I've already read to you what they plan to do to the Jews, or what they plan to do to a certain group of people, what they plan to do to the Christian or the Muslims or whoever, what they plan to do. And so her reply to him, starting with verse 11, starting with verse 10, I'm sorry.
Again Esther spake unto
This
Hattai.
was like her servant that had gone out to Mordecai, because Mordecai, he initially came to Mordecai. Mordecai sent him back, and now she's replying. Continue.
And gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether the man or woman, shall come into the king, into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live.
So she's telling Mordecai, what do you want me to do? I can't go before the king. I can't present this petition to the king because he has not called me. And so if I go in, he could kill me because he's going to say, what are you doing up in here? I did not call you. And that was a violation of the law. And she knew that. She said, so what do you want me to do? I can't do anything. Continue.
But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews.
So don't think that you're going to escape. See, because you're saying, look, I'm not going to say nothing. I'm just going to, be silent. This will roll over and everything's going to be all right again. So she told Mordecai, don't put me out there on the firing line. I'm not doing all that. And he said, don't think that you won't escape in the king's palace any other of the Jews, because you won't escape, even though you might act like you don't know what's going on. You may act like somebody else can do it. The burden can't be mine because the things that I might suffer as a result of taking a stand. Don't think that you're going to escape, because when they come to get me as a Jew, they're going to get you too. Because you be only as good as your last favor. And they're going to say, oh, you're one of them. Continue.
For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place.
So it said, if you don't do it, God will raise up someone else to do it. So in our fire and in the fires of our life, if we don't do it, God raise up somebody else to do it. And this is the month of fire. This is the year of fire. Continue.
But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
So you've been raised up on a certain foundation for such a time as this. Now the things that you have learned and the things that you prayed on and the things that was given to you, now there's an opportunity to give those things back. But there might be some fire attached to it, because things have to be sacrificed in the fire. And we are not too keen on sacrificing and those kinds of things. We're keen on listening and learning and going about our lives. That's what we do. And it's not I'm trying to condemn anybody, but that's what we do as people. It is God that sets a fire right behind us or right beside us, that we get a revelation that there's smoke. And so then we realize that if we don't move because the fire's right behind us, we're just going to just plain be burnt up. So in order, so that the fire's meant to kind of push us along a little bit, that we will come to an understanding that it's in the fire that the work of God is tested, because he's looking for gold and silver and precious things in our lives, something that he can continue to build on. And all the wood, hay, and stubble, that can burn. And that's in all of our lives, the wood, the hay, and the stubble. And in these days, God is trying to build up a building. We've had someone in our church recently as of yesterday, that 25 years ago at least, maybe more than that, she came to the house of God for God to build up a foundation. And we've watched over the years the foundation that God had this particular person on, and we saw a building that was being set up, built up. And God knows the kind of buildings he wants up in his city. And so even though we may have thought this building is not ready, but God says this building is ready. It's ready to be transferred from this place to that place, the heavenly Jerusalem, the spirits of just men made perfect. And so in thinking about this individual, I asked this individual to text me when they get there, and because it's going to be a lot of souls up there, and I want to come to the building that God erected for his spirit to dwell in, and I want to come and tabernacle with her a little bit. So there's a reason for the things that are going on in our life, because God has the final say. God is at the